Good afternoon to everyone. On behalf of Federation of Information Technology, the FITIS, I warmly welcome you for the webinar on digitally signed documents organized by the FITIS in association with LK Domain Registry and Lanka Clear. We at FITIS, together with LK Domain Registry, realized the importance of work from home concept. And in line with that, we created a separate website to support everyone from work from home, provide more guidance and the solutions. Therefore, we initiated a separate website called www.wfh.lk, from which you all can get more guidance and the solution provided by the FITIS members, and in order to set up your work from home concept. We thought this is much more appropriate at this critical time. In line with work from home concept, when we initially conducted few sessions, then we realized the importance of how you should sign the documents digitally. Since there is a legal framework within Sri Lanka, we thought that we should educate you all on this subject. So therefore, we once again join hands with LK Domain Registry to get the Lanka Clear to educate you. And I am very pleased that this afternoon we have 3 eminent members of the panel to talk to you about how you sign digital documents. We have Mr. Jayantha Fernando joining with us, who is the chairman of LK Domain Registry, and also Mr. Chandra De Silva, GM, CEO Lanka Clear, and also Professor Kihan Dias, CEO of LK Domain Registry. In addition to that, I am very pleased. Hello. Hello.
I can hear you, Aruna.
All right. Okay. In addition to that, I'm very pleased that we also the event series supported by a few of our members. Starting with we do have our event partner, SoftLogic Technologies, who has been supporting our webinar series. This is the sixth seminar, sixth of the event which we are having it. Also, we have with us, also we are being supported by our corporate partners, Lanka Bell, LK Domain Registry, Luna Labs, Orel IT, Sarva Integrators, Zillion, and the TechSphere. Also, we are happy to have our platform partner / Tech Labs, who has been supporting with our platforms. Our supporting organization, National Chamber of Commerce, Colombo Chamber of Commerce, Federation of Chamber of Commerce of Sri Lanka, and the ACCA, who has been supportive of promoting this event today. So with that introduction, I would like to now call upon Mr. Jayantha De Silva, Jayantha Fernando, who is chairman of LK Domain Registry and the director of ITA, to start his presentation on digitally signed documents. Jayantha, with that, over to you.
Hi, Aruna, you can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Is it clear?
It's very clear.
Yeah, I'm about to upload my slides. Hold on. Have the slides come up?
Yes, it is there.
Right, give me a minute. Huh? Yeah, so I will quickly start a slideshow. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. You can all hear me, right, Aruna?
Can hear, yes, go on.
So moving on, I just want to explain. I mean, this time, unlike the previous time, I am doing a short overview with a set of slides, and I'll give a quick status update about the electronic transaction legal regime that sets a foundation for the entire digital transactions ecosystem in Sri Lanka. Okay. So basically, if you look at the electronic transactions, electronic commerce, electronic government, that entire ecosystem in the digital transactions domain, you have business, consumers, government in a triangular arrangement, all having to work together, right? And basically you have B2C activity, B2 governmental activity, then consumer to government, government, citizen related services. So all these transactions are critical to the digital transactions ecosystem, and the question arises whether there is a set of legal norms and standards that facilitates and enables these digital transactions between all of them to work effectively in any given society. So if you look at the international benchmarking that was started years ago, what happened historically was that most countries started enacting electronic transactions, digital transactions legislation based on an international standard that actually predated even the internet. Basically the wide use of the internet. So we had in the good old days something called the UNCITRAL model law on electronic commerce. Basically UNCITRAL is the UN trade law organization that develops minimum standards guidelines with regard to trade, commerce, business, and including enforcement of arbitration, standards governing arbitration, commercial mediation, and so on and so forth. Basically, it is the apex international trade law body. So this body set up a special task team within what is called a working group on electronic commerce that developed the very first standard way back, which was called the UNCITRAL model law on e-commerce. So most countries enacted laws based on the UNCITRAL model law on e-commerce, and basically that became the primary benchmarking tool. Maybe about over 60 countries adopted legal standards based on that, and the UNCITRAL model law on e-commerce basically said that if there was a paper-based documentation process that was used, you can have a functional equivalence in the electronic media for paper-based concepts such as writing and signing, and even for an original, provided certain minimum rules were met. However, what is important to understand is that because this model law was only a model law and not a mandatory set of standards, many countries used it, but all those countries realized that this model law does not create a binding obligation on the country to adopt it as a domestic set of rules. So there were lots of variations taking place. So as a basic result of the UNCITRAL model law concept was that countries adopted various standards, norms deriving from the model law template, and there was no harmonization between countries as a result. Different countries had different standards. One country had a higher standard. Countries like India went and developed their own standard, basically mandatorily requiring only certain classes of electronic signatures, let's say, to be recognized. So they could do that because they are a big country. Then you find lack of uniformity in the global electronic commerce landscape. And the biggest problem in the context of today's discussion was whether or not electronic signature or digital certificate generated in one country could be accepted in another country. So there was lack of interoperability between countries due to the use of this UNCITRAL model law framework, and this became a barrier to the growth of international electronic commerce. So what was the outcome? After many months, rather many years of debate, the United Nations General Assembly gave a mandate once again to UNCITRAL, the UN Trade Law Commission, to set up an expert drafting committee between member states. There were about 60 countries that took part in this discussion, including Sri Lanka. We took part representing Sri Lanka with the Minister of Foreign Affairs from 2001 to 2006. And the end result of that international dialogue or the international negotiation based on that UN mandate was to formulate what we call an international treaty, a binding legal instrument that would mean that when a country signs up to this international standard, they can't deviate from various provisions in it. They are bound to adhere to the framework of this international instrument called the convention, and that became known as the UN Convention on International United Nations Convention on the Use of Electronic Communications in International Contract. That's a long name. We in the legal profession call it the UN Electronic Communications Convention, or ECC in short. So basically it enables the cross-border paperless trade. It maintains that functional equivalence to writing to an original, to a signing. And then the most important thing is it prevents technology discrimination. So the law has to become technology neutral so that any new standard can be used without the law being changed, so that the law becomes continuously adaptive to developments in technology. And the most important feature of this new regime at that time was that it permitted cross-border recognition of electronic signatures, and even scenarios where contracts could be formed without human intervention between machine-driven bots or software tools, so that machines could enter into contractual arrangements without even human intervention. And that was a bold step forward in the context of artificial intelligence and so on and so forth. So end result was that do you have my slides? Hello?
Slide disappeared now.
Wait.
Yes, it's there.
Available?
It's there. Yeah.
So basically, what we have is the international gold standard. So basically, what I want to emphasize is the fact that the UN Electronic Communications Convention is the standard that is currently available, and this became the international gold standard that became recognized globally as a benchmarking instrument for international electronic commerce and digital transactions. So this is the background and the international regime. And what I have to emphasize is that although the Sri Lankan original law of 2006 was basically modeled on the old electronic commerce model law, when we were in the final stages of drafting the Electronic Transactions Act, because of the fact that we were part of the international negotiations team associated with the UN Electronic Communications Convention drafting that took place between 2001 to 2004, we made sure that the Electronic Transactions Act of Sri Lanka included some of the features of this UN Electronic Communications Convention. So in short, the Sri Lankan law had some of the features of the e-commerce 2.0 version law, which is the international gold standard. And then later in 2015, when Sri Lanka entered the convention, that we did after a benchmarking exercise we started in 2014 with a big event in Colombo. And between 2014 and 15, we did a gap analysis to the Electronic Transactions Act. And based on the gap analysis, a comprehensive amendment was enacted based on the recommendation we gave in 2017. A new amendment was presented to Parliament and enacted as Act number 25 of 2017. So basically what that does is Sri Lankan law is upgraded to the higher standard, the higher benchmarking standard that governs its digital transactions so as to ensure that we have the best rules governing the electronic equivalent of a writing, electronic equivalent of an electronic signature, which I'll come to in a few minutes, as well as electronic equivalent of a original, and so on and so forth, including standards governing digital government, standards governing electronic evidence. So as a result, the Sri Lankan law meets the international gold standard based on the global norms available currently. And as a result, Sri Lankan electronic transactions law is one of the few, along with Singapore, along with the amendment in Australia. The Sri Lankan law is looked upon as a reference guide in African countries, most lately Ethiopia, Ghana, then you have in Montenegro, Serbia, Croatia, as well as in Fiji. So the Fijian, which was the latest one, is entirely benchmarked on the Sri Lankan experience, and we were invited to present our journey to some of those countries based on the amendments we have done. So that is basically the international legal framework mapping onto the Sri Lankan law. So coming back to the Sri Lankan law, I mentioned this previously. Our law basically, I have taken a snapshot from the preamble or the head note in the law itself. You can see very clearly it says it is an act to recognize and facilitate the formation of contracts, the creation and exchange of 4 classes of documents. The 4 classes of documents are data messages, electronic documents, electronic records, and communications. So if you look at the definition of a data message, if you look at the definition of electronic document, electronic record in the Electronic Transactions Act, these definitions are very simply formulated to show even a layman that our day-to-day human activity can be recognized in the electronic media. So for example, a question arose whether SMS would be legally recognized during the time when this electronic transactions was enacted. So if you look at the definition of data message, it says very simply, data message means information generated, sent, received by the recipient, or stored by electronic, magnetic, optical, or other similar means. So SMS would definitely come under the definition of a data message. And that was used by the Commercial High Court of Colombo way back in 2008 in the Marine Star case in a debt recovery matter, where the information contained in an SMS was admitted to determine the liability of the parties, because the defendant in that case had admitted liability saying will admitted liability to the plaintiff in several SMSs saying he knew that he owes the plaintiff a certain amount of money. So you can see the definition of data messages, very simple formula was used by court to admit the contents of a SMS in a money recovery case in the Commercial High Court of Colombo, and a series of court cases came about, which you will see in a few slides further down. If you look at the word definition of electronic document, right? The definition says it includes documents, records, information, communications, or transactions in electronic form. So you have your Microsoft Office or any other Office template application you use on your computer. You start doing a document, you give it a file name, save it in your folder, and that is your electronic document, and you will share it with other people. That's an electronic document. And what the law says is that for that to be recognized as an electronic document, you have to ensure that document is recoverable, not destroyed. So you need to have a process by which you can archive, store such electronic documents in digital media. Electronic records, on the other hand, are conversion of manual documents into digital media. So you have your set of hard copy files in your office, you want to index them and digitally scan them and store them in digital media. That becomes an electronic record. So all these instruments are recognized by Sri Lankan law. So basically, to sum it all forms of digital commerce, digital transactions, including electronic contracts, electronic signatures are legally valid, except certain category of instruments which are referred to in section 23 of the Electronic Transactions Act, which are excluded from the ambit of the electronic transactions law. Basically, last wills, powers of attorney, and things like that, where higher degree of verification of the parties to those transactions are required by a notary. So moving on, section 3 of the Electronic Transactions Act lays out a broad principle where basically section 3 says that a data message, electronic document, electronic record, or a communication should not be denied legal effect, enforceability, or validity purely on the ground that it is in electronic form. That's all it says. So if by any chance in a court or in an arbitration tribunal or any other proceeding, somebody tries to take an objection, look here, you cannot admit an email, you cannot admit a SMS, you cannot admit an electronic signature or an electronic document. Because it's in electronic form, we need to see the original hard copy. Then one should refer to section 3 and tell court, look here, the mere fact we have maintained something in electronic form should not be the basis to deny effect, validity, or enforceability. And that is a crucial point we need to remember. Why? Because section 3 has been used as a baseline in several matters before the Court of Appeal recently, especially in 2017, 18, and even 1 or 2 cases last year, to knock out submissions by parties to reject documents purely because those documents have been presented to court in electronic form. So it has come to a stage where documents in thumb drives, CDs, and other media are now presented to courts of law. And one last point to remember in this equation, the definition of data messages, definition related to electronic document, electronic record, and the definition of communications have been derived from those international standards I mentioned earlier. So remember, the law and the definitions we have used are internationally compatible, so that electronic document or a digital document coming within the definition of electronic document here will be accepted in another country where they have corresponding laws similar to or based on that international benchmark standard I mentioned earlier. So moving on, we have all these various sections in the Electronic Transactions Act. I'm not going to go through all of them, but emphasize on section 7, which governs validity of electronic signatures. And then of course we have in section 4 before that certain principles governing electronic equivalence to writing. So basically a writing obligation can be maintained in digital media if you do it in, you do your document in the form of a data message, in the form of an electronic document, and so on and so forth, and store and archive it in a manner that it becomes recoverable. The term used here is that information contained therein is accessible so as to be usable for subsequent reference. So you have to have a storing archival system which is indexed and maintained properly with security guidelines, internal security guidelines, so that you can recover these documents when needed. That is the crucial point to remember across the provisions of the Electronic Transactions Act. That's a crucial condition. On section 7, which is the most important section in relation to some of the discussions today, what I have to emphasize is that the electronic equivalent of signing is ensured by the use of electronic signatures, and section 7 provides for the legal effect of an electronic signature. So it is a very broad concept that you find here, and I have explained the concept clearly, and I think Gihan just confirmed to me by SMS that he has already uploaded the slides on the website. So I will not go into the details here. You can see the formulation done in very simplistic form to demonstrate to the audience that any technology is acceptable to be used, whether it's a PIN number, QR code, biometric, scan signature embedded through a PDF generated tool. Those will be recognized as electronic signatures. But remember, if you want to do significantly value-based transactions, it is useful to ensure that you digitally sign the document with a digital certificate obtained from a certificate service provider, which ensures greater degree of legal validity and enforceability in law. And then when it comes to cross-border recognition, those digital certificates issued here will be legally valid elsewhere, because recently we put the root certificate also in place. So these are crucial points to remember. And in the Sri Lankan context, we have made some advancements which you will see in the next slide. Basically, in terms of the governance framework relating to electronic government, section 8 provides for the minimum standards, including the procedure and criteria for the use of electronic records and electronic signatures for government transactions, governed in section 8.2. But regulations have to be made depending on the nature of the governmental transaction. And in some case, for example, we now have a recent development in the context of work from home, a process to draft a regulation or a circular governing the use of electronic signatures for governmental activity, so that government organizations can digitally sign their documents and make them available to the other governmental agency. So that circular has just been finalized, and our Ministry Additional Secretary confirmed that the translations have just been completed, and we are likely to see that circular going out later this week. In terms of the governance framework for use of electronic signatures in Sri Lanka, here is the hierarchy that I have explained. So we have basically a legal regime that recognizes certain functions to be performed by the National Certificate Authority, which is the root certificate function, and basically that entity can facilitate the recognition of other certification service providers. This entire framework is governed by a body established under the Electronic Transactions Act called the Task Force, the National Certificate Authority Task Force. established under Section 18A of the Electronic Transactions Act. And the task force has been functioning from 2011, and over the years, based on the certificate practices adopted, based on the international standards adopted, we gave an authorization to one provider in Sri Lanka at the moment, that is Lanka Clear CSP, which will give a broad explanation of its function in a short while. Finally, what I have to emphasize is that in terms of electronic evidence admissibility, Electronic Transactions Act provides for minimum rules to be followed with the presumption of admissibility. I will not go into the legal jargon associated with that, but we need to take questions on admissibility rules. Basically, the contents or information contained in a data message, electronic document, electronic record, or a communication, as well as electronic signature associated with that, is prima facie admissible in a court. And basically, this provision has been used in several cases in the recent times to admit various classes of electronic documents, electronic records. And here are some examples, starting with the admissibility of SMS case in 2007. Of course, there are several new cases which I have not gone on to add into this slide, but here is a cross-section of cases based on recent case law development in Sri Lanka. So in conclusion, I'm sorry I have taken a bit of extra time. This always happens when you Aruna gets me to do slides like this. It always happens. I'm sorry, but in conclusion, what I have to say is that the Electronic Transactions Act provides the ultimate legal certainty for all digital transactions and digital documents, including electronic contracts. So it has come to a kind of a norm. Let's say Aruna Alvis and I are known to each other, or Gihandayas and I are known to each other. And then let's say Channa and Disilva and I are known to each other. So between all of us, if you want to enter into a contract, we don't need to meet. He can digitally sign, starting with maybe Aruna, then he can transfer the rest of his signed document to Channa, and then thereafter to Gihan, and then I will sign it. Or if they want me to certify it, I will certify it digitally at the very end. So that entire electronic contract cycle can be done digitally, and lots of people are doing it as of now. So don't be scared. Go ahead and do even your electronic contracts digitally. If you want to, if you don't know each other, then of course digitally signing using digital certificates can ensure greater degree of validity. And of course, the good thing about digital signing is that if there are adjustments, amendments which are made, it will be very obvious to the party who gets the document that some tampering has happened. So that is an advantage. And I think people like Channa and Gihandayas will explain that digitally signing and digitally signed documents have almost tamper-proof situation vis-a-vis paper-based documents. So I think it is better to go and better to use this current tragic situation to move into the electronic digital commerce domain. And then of course, ensuring legal recognition of electronic signatures is also ensured through the law, as I explained. And then finally, admissibility of electronic documents in courts of law is also ensured. So with that note, thank you, Aruna.
Thank you, Dant, for that insightful presentation on legal aspects of digitally signing documents. So before we get on with the next presentation, ladies and gentlemen, may I remind you that you have the opportunity of put forwarding your question and answers on the chat screen, so that during the Q&A session we can take up those questions. So with that, let me now introduce for us to look at practical aspects of how we sign digital documents. For that we have Mr. Channa Disilva, who is GM and the CEO of Lanka Clear, to take you through the practical aspects of how you sign digitally, how you sign a document. So with that, Channa, may I hand over to you to take us through your presentation?
Thank you, Aruna. Thanks for the invite. So let me just share the presentation with you. Is it visible? Hello.
I cannot see the presentation slide. Yes, now it is. Yes, it has come now.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Aruna. So I'll be brief and I'll try to make it non-technical as possible, because I know there is a fair bit of non-technical users that may be connected. So I mean, the topic today is, can we use digital sign documents to support work from home? Absolutely. And let me sort of explain in simple terms how that works. So if you really look at what is a digital certificate, it's simply a file that certifies the identity of an individual or institution seeking access to legal information. For example, if I want to send somebody some information, and for the receiving party to know that I'm the one who sent it, normally what would happen is I would get it on a letterhead of my organization. Let's say it's official letter. I will be physically signing and sending it. So, but now with the COVID and other things, sending that physically is difficult. Actually, obviously, I can take a scanned copy and send it. But as most of you know, the scan copies also could be digitally altered. As we know from social media, how people alter even photo. But the way forward is, can we send a document signed digitally and electronically, which the receiver knows that the document after signing was not altered? I think that is the whole purpose of a digital certificate. And what does a digital certificate consist? It consists of a public key and some personal details of the owner. Could be the name, email address, or any other information that may be part of that. And signed by the private key of the certificate. So if you just simply look at, if you have to submit a copy of your identity card or some legal document, a photocopy of a document, the government authority asks you to get it certified by a justice of. So what is justice of peace? Somebody that validates that this is the original document, right? So technically, if you really look at the purpose of a CA, is actually validating that the signature is authentic and signature belongs to the party who actually signs it. So I think that is the simple explanation I can give. What is, I mean, in a layman's term, what the function of a certificate authority. And what are the types of certificates that can be used? Obviously, email can be digitally signed, or documents. Servers can be provided digital certificates, like when you are especially accessing servers and security, you would see instead of HTTP, you would use HTTPS. That means it's using and also certain applications like web applications or any form of digital applications can use certificates to ensure authenticity. And also mobile devices can use digital certificates to digitally sign transactions or even digitally sign documents. So these are some of the applications that are currently in use. If you really look at how do you put a digital certificate into a document, it's a very simple process. You would create your document in any word processing. Maybe it could be Microsoft Word or some sort of a editor, a word processor, and then if you can save it in PDF form as a PDF Adobe Acrobat document or PDF document, most of the applications current days allows you to save it as a, and then very simply what you do is you simply that document, there is an option to put your digital signature. And when you put your digital signature, it simply looks like if you look at standard one, if you look at the top left hand corner, it's just the way a standard digital certificate appears on your document. So it can can be somebody authorized signatory's approval and the names, time, and the date, and all those things are there. But if a particular recipient wants a physical signature, scanned copy of a physical signature, that also can be part of your digital signature, as the bottom right hand corner shows. For example, if you are submitting a request for a payment to a bank, they actually have a copy of your physical signature, and then when you sign a payment request and send a letter, they match the two physical signatures and actually validate the authenticity. So in order to do that, you can actually also attach a scanned version of your letter and also along with the digital signature. So this is typically what. So how would a receiver identify this digital certificate? So if you click on the digital signature, then the bottom left hand corner screen will come where you click on signature property, and then the next screen comes where you need to click on the signer's certificate, and you would get the screen on the right hand side, which basically provides the sender and the party, the example I took, justice of peace, and the party that validates that this certificate actually belongs to this user who claims that he or she sends it. So for example, if you just scan a document with a digital signature, just scan a document and just send it without digitally signing it, which may have a scanned version of your physical signature, it could be that somebody had altered and put somebody else's signature because nobody actually has validated that document. But in this case, a certificate authority or a CSP, certificate service provider, validates that certificate based on certain criteria. You will get how they do that. In that, okay, this particular signature or digital certificates belong to this particular user. So that is the function the certificate authority does. So coming back to the certificate authority or the CS, Lanka Sign is a CSP currently in operation, which was established under the guidance of Central Bank, and it was launched in 22nd of May 2009 as the first certificate authority in Sri Lanka, and under the in accordance with the Electronic Transaction Act number 19 of 2006, which is within the provisions of the ETA. And when the certification authority was set up, it is equipped with all international requirements of a commercial CS facility. For example, the world accepted standard for CAs is Web Trust, and certificate authority, when it was designed and set up, it followed the Web Trust standard. And this was further validated by ISO 27001 2013 certification, which certifies that the process that is followed is secure and the process adheres to international standards. On top of that, the environment that the certificate authority is built is what's called the highest security standard, PCI DSS, which is used for payment cards, which is in that environment with a 24/7 365 availability, and with also DR, the backup side, with also using military grade security appliances. So that's sort of in a nutshell the strength of the certificate service provider who's going to sign this certificate. So the whole idea is, now I took the example of a JP. So JP is somebody that is authorized to validate somebody's or validate that a document is authentic. So for example, how does the trust model build here? Now the whole process is basically under the purview of Central Bank, and the authorization or authority or monitoring has been done by ICT agency and also Sri Lanka CERT. So what actually happens is the way it works is basically what actually is done is when a person's digital certificate is signed by the key of the certificate authority. So that key is what guarantees or what ensures saying that, hey, this particular signature belongs to the sender who actually sends it. So in order to ensure that the key of the certificate authority is secure and trusted, so all these three trusted entities are part and parcel of what's called a root key signing ceremony, which is actually ensures that all international standards are to ensure that the security and safety of that root key is ensured. So that process ensures that it's a trusted CSP or trusted root key. And then further, this process is certified via an audit, annual audit, which is carried by ISO and which comes under ISO 27001 2013 standard, which ensures that the process followed is correct and secure and also following international standards. And these certificates of Lanka sign is, as I said previously, is in an environment which is covered under PCI DSS, as well as using military grade secure equipment. Further, these certificates are not just sent via email or anything. It's actually get automatically. It's generated by what's called a HSM module, which is a hardware high security module, which basically gets copied onto what's called a encryption token or trust key, or it's a small device which is a secure device, and it never leaves anywhere. It doesn't get copied onto a PC or it doesn't get copied onto anybody, which is basically the private key of the user, which doesn't leave that digital small device, which is secure and which is also password protected by the end user. And this is the so this digital certificate is in that device, and that device is needed to digitally sign a document. So as you can see, from end to end, it's secure, and once it goes to the user, only the user can access it because of the password protection of that digital certificate. And this process has actually been there since 2009. And if you really look at, there are all the financial transactions, most of it, the financial transactions, starting from check clearing slips, which is most of your salaries and other things are paid interbank. All these are digitally signed. So including central bank, 45 financial institutions in the country are using these signatures every day to carry out this financial transactions. In addition, Sri Lanka Chamber of Commerce actually using this with more than 150 of their import-export companies to digitally share documents, whatever the documents that they need to share and validate the authenticity. They are using digital signatures. The Central Depository System of Colombo Stock Exchange use digital certificates for sharing some of the documents and other aspects with their traders and also brokers. Sri Lanka Customs has started this process, couple of years ago, and they have already got about 240 traders obtaining the digital certificate. The purpose is for traders to submit their documents rather than physically visiting the site, to submit electronically, which are digitally signed. Actually, they even went to the extent of they have something called a green channel, where they even suspended the green channel if those traders who are under green channel facility did not obtain certificates, digital certificates to sign the documents. In addition, we have started also a process of issuing digital certificates to mobile devices. We have more than 100,000 certificates issued already, which are using for fair bit of the mobile payments that are happening. Actually, we have seen a drastic growth during the last 2 weeks for obvious reasons. And all these, more than 100,000 of these devices are carrying digital certificates, which are issued in real time, and they are used to digitally sign a mandate with their acquiring bank, as well as some of the banks are using this digital signature for digitally signing the actual payment. So the whole purpose of this digital signature is ensuring that a mandate is given to the bank to carry out a financial transaction, which is, it's even much more secure. It has to be much more even exchanging a physical document, because the customer is giving authorization to to a bank to carry out a financial transaction using this. So it's actually used for that kind of critical functions as well. I'll now get to the process of obtaining digital certificate. First of all, you as an organization, you have to sign what's called a subscriber agreement. So that the organization will provide digital certificates to their whoever they are individual users that the organization want to get digital certificate. For that, organization will first need to sign, and then once the agreement is submitted or signed, a digital application needs to be submitted by each user. And all these previously, all these were physical. You had to bring. So, for example, for the agreement and the certificate, there are certain documents the company has to provide that to validate the authenticity of the company, like the business registration, and there are certain other things. So, if you look at the right-hand side, there's a link URL provided. All these steps and processes and documents are there. You can actually go and identify. And once the agreement is signed and the application is provided and all the information is by the certificate authority will go ahead and create a digital signature or digital certificate for the user into this. And previously the token, the users had to come and physically collect it, but now we have come with a process. We will create. We are actually also getting Pickme, the type of channels to deliver this service, to the locations that are needed. So entire end-to-end process now can be done from home or wherever that your workplace is. And once you receive the token or the physical device, you need to install the certificate as well as the security token onto the PC. And that also process was explained in very clearly under certain documents in that. And once that is done, you can start digitally signing a document. So you just simply get so in order for you to sign that document, you have to physically connect that dongle or the token digital unit into the PC or the laptop, whatever device that you use. And then when you sign, when you the signing process is also clearly explained in one of the documents under step 6. And once you sign that, it will before you before it puts the signature into the document, it will ask for the password for the device, which is only with the user. So there is a further validation that the user has to know the password or the PIN to that device. That once that is signed, we encourage everybody to send that document via email, official email, ideally. So the whole purpose of this is this document is not just internal. I mean, obviously, you, for example, in our case, all our memos, all our internal approvals are digitally signed. We don't physically sign them. Even our board papers, we digitally sign and send it. So there are 2 or 3 or 4 parties. Each one, signs and then forwards it using very simple email. We don't have a workflow. We don't. But if you have a workflow, you can submit it through the workflow to the next approver, and next approver finally. The final authority who actually submits the board, for example, in our case, chairman. Once the chairman signs the document, the beauty of the document cannot be changed. If the document is changed for some this thing, it shows that it was changed. So the validity of the document after the final signature is put remains intact, and that final authority can submit to the receiver. So once the receiver gets the document, as I explained previously, you can click on the digital signature and find out the validity and who has actually authorized or validated the CSP, and check the CSP details. And the CSP ideally is a trusted authority who is actually validating, in other words, validating, the authenticity of the signature as well as the authenticity of the sender. And that is then that constitute of a sharing of a document. And the receiver, for example, I mean, these days, even with Bank of Srilanka, doing all our payment requests, salary transfer, all this the time we had to physically sign a document and send it. Now we are digitally signing it, emailing it, and the bank is accepting it and sending the payments electronically. So that's how we can actually work from home. We are 24/7, 365 operation. We are running the operation. Physical presence is needed for 10-15 people who need to check on the change the physically need to be there. For example, maintenance staff, 1 or 2 people need to be there to ensure certain things. But other than that, most of the people are working from home, submitting documents electronically, digitally signed, and the operation is 24/7. And we can actually, we have not so far had not any downtimes, and we can run the operation. So that's the beauty of digital signatures. With this we are, we are eating our dog food, if you will. So we are using our own technology effectively to run a 24/7, 365-day operation, and any opportunity has the potential to do this. So that's basically my presentation. Aruna, you want to take it up?
Yes, Channa. Yeah, thank you very much, Channa, for that, taking us through, showing us how practically digital signatures can be used. So our next presentation is to give a demonstration how you could put your signatures digitally. For that, we have Professor Gihan Dias, Professor of University of Morotua and the CEO of the LK Domain Registry. So with that introduction, may I request Professor to take over from here onwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Aruna. So let me quickly share my screen. Just give me a second. Okay, please hold on. This is okay, I'm trying to get this audio to be shared now. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm still trying to get the audio to come on here. So there was a format, or there was some control for that, which I can't find right now. Still looking for that. Can somebody tell me now? Share it, and then. Yes, Crystal. Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you.
So, okay, let me see what we can do. Right. Anyway, that's okay. I will talk manually. So let me share this audio, so this presentation, but I will talk since apparently the. So what we're going to do now. Right. So can you hear me? Sign a document and then send it to another person, and then get that person to approve. The standard thing. Okay, so what we are doing here is we are doing a document.
The
Right, and
volume.
Sorry?
We heard the volume on the video, actually.
You heard it on the video. Okay, let's switch it on again. Okay. Right, can you hear that?
Yeah.
Okay, right. Let's start from the beginning. Sorry.
What we're going to do now is look at how we can use Adobe Acrobat to sign a document and then send it to another person and then get that person to approve. So this is the standard thing which we do in most of our organization. We prepare a document, we then sign it, and then we forward it to another person. The other person can approve it or disapprove it or whatever and sign it and send it back. So I have created a small form, and we are using Adobe Acrobat Reader DC. This is the latest version of Adobe Acrobat Reader, the version called DC, and this is a free version which you can just download and use. I'm sure most of you have this. If you have the paid version, that's also fine. But all these features work on the free version as well. Okay, so what do we do now? We are going to fill up this form. So to do that, we have already opened the form, and let's go to Tools, and then we have this Fill and Sign, the purple pen. Just click on that, right? And then Class, okay, You. So just click on that one. And since I have already created a form, it will say this. Okay, now let's fill it up. So I can go to various fields and fill this up. So let's put the date 20/04/2020, and let's say somebody has something. So we will say that Albert Pereira is the person who wants this, whatever, and the description is sample form is filled, right? So just type in whatever. And here I have put the preparer's name. I can change it if you like, but I will just keep it as it is for now. Right, so I have filled up the form. And I am assuming that this is being filled up by this person called Shanti Silva. Now, Shanti Silva needs to sign the form. And to do that, we are going to sign it with a digital signature. Now, I want to explain slightly, I think the previous speakers have also done that, the difference between an electronic signature and a digital signature. An electronic signature can be anything, can be just a picture of your signature, but a digital signature is created on your computer based on a special key which is stored on your computer or maybe on a device. And so the digital signature says that, okay, somebody using this computer with your password has created this and it has not been modified. So of course, it does not know that you have created it, but it does know that somebody who is using your password has done it. So just the same if you go to your electronic banking, online banking thing, right? The bank does not know who it is, but it does know that it is the person who has given the correct password. Okay, so let's do that. So to sign this, now I have already filled this up. I will again go to Tools, and I will go to this thing called Certificates, the green quill pen-like thing. If it doesn't turn up, if you don't see certificate, just click Show More, and many more things will come, and certificates should be there. Just click on that, right? And then on here, in this bar, we will see something called Digital Sign turn up again. So just click on that, right? And then the cursor changes to a cross. Just go here, and I'm going to sign somewhere here. So I will highlight that area. Right. Now let's configure a digital ID for this Shanti Silva. And I'm going to create a new digital ID. So I can use different things. Let's go to the third one. Create a new digital ID and continue. Now it says we have to save it. We'll save it to this Windows Certificate Store. Continue. And now we will fill this up. So we put these names here. Shanti Silva is the name. And we will say it belongs to the domain registry. And we will put the name as Shanti right? And if you want, you can change the country, but I will not bother to do that right now. So the important thing here is the name. You can put organization unit, so what is the part of your organization, but you should have your name, and it is very important, the email address, right? And this is what is called the self-signed digital ID. What you mean by self-signed digital ID is that it is just you yourself who say, I have signed this. Nobody else confirms that your signature is correct. So there's a different type, which, for example, the Lanka sign producers, where the certification authority give the certificate saying that this signature belongs to this person. Right? So you just do the self-signed one, and as I said, it is free. You can do it straight away using the free version of Adobe Acrobat PC. So save. Right now I see Shanti Silva Windows Digital ID. So I will now, it's already selected, and I will say continue. Right now I will look at what it looks like. So I will just go here and say edit, and it allows me to change various things. I will have the date, the logo, and the location. I will just keep those here for now. And sorry, and the name. So I think I will. Yeah, I don't think it's needed here. Right. So I will say now save. Right. So now this is what your digital signature will look like. The name will be there and digitally signed on. I can change this to prepared by. Right. I can change something. So this location field I'm using to do various things. So it will accept, and then I will write sign. And now it will ask you to save it. I will save it as number 4 sign, right? Now it will say Shanti Silvia prepared on this date, and it is now signed. Now, how do you know this document is signed? Well, you can go to this thing on the left-hand side, right? This thing on the left-hand side, and it says this is the signature validation panel or signature panel, and it says signed and all signatures are valid. Please fill out the following form and save data type into this form. Right? So now I have signed it and saved it. Now, as Shanti Silva, I'm going to send this document to someone else. So since anyway, I just want to show you the same thing, same document. I assume it has been sent to someone else, and the same person, in this case, will be Gihan Tyres, is going to open this form, right? So let's open the form again. Right. Now I'll open this as Gihan Tyres. I can check the signature is signed and all of these things are correct. But I will, just to be sure, I will do one more thing. Since this is the first time I'm getting a document signed by Shanti Silva, I will save that document. To do that, I need to go to show signature properties and then show sign and certificate. And here there's a thing called trust. We have here trust, and then say add to trusted certificate. Now this way, if I know that Shanti Silva is a legitimate person, then I can say that I accept this certificate. Now you should do that only if you are quite sure that this document is actually coming from Shanti Silva and not from any other person. So anyway, since I'm okay with that, I will say okay, right? And then I will okay here again. So now I have accepted this. Now I need to see whether I am approving this or not. Let's say I like to approve it. So to do that, I will put a comment. So once this document has been signed, you can't modify it. So for example, I can't change this name or this date or anything like that, right? Those are not. So right now, there's no way for me to change this. But I can add a comment. To do that, I go in tools, right? And remember, this is now handle, and go to this first one for comment. And then I will select this for text, right? And I will add a comment here to say, okay, so I can write approve here, I can write this is okay, but to get I can put all sorts of things here, right? So I just give a comment. Now I need to sign it, so I will sign it here under digital signature authorizer. So I just click here, and I can use my existing digital signature called behind bias, right? So I will use that signature to sign it, and I would like to have a picture coming there, so I will just show you this one, right? And I will say here, approve, right? I can type various things here, and I'm going to lock this document after signing to prevent anybody else from changing it, and I will say sign. Okay, now it asks me to save it again, so I will save it under different name. Right. Now I have this document which is first of all prepared by Shanti Silva and this is approved by Bias, and so I don't need to do anything, and I can't change this anymore. Just check. I will close this and open it again. This is sample form approved, right? So again it says signed and all signatures are valid. So let's run at the signature panel, and it says revision 1 signed by Shanti Silva. So it says first it is there, and then we say some annotations are created. Annotation is this comment here, and then it is signed by behind bias, right? That's the second one, and then it says document block. Now if I try to modify this in any way, it will say the document is blocked and cannot be modified. Comment, right? It will not really allow me to put a comment. You can see all of these are grayed in, so I can't really do anything here, but just look at it, right? And if I actually do make a change somehow, what will happen is that the document, the signature will no longer be valid. If we say document has been modified after changes. So this is a very simple thing. It allows us to create that form, and then you fill up that form, and somebody signs that form, by in this case Shanti Silva, and you email that form or you send it in some other way to the other person, in this case behind bias, and behind bias can approve it and maybe make a comment and sign it again. And of course it can be then go to a third person or a fourth person. It can have a fairly complicated thing, but it can be done quite easily using only the free version of Adobe Acrobat Reader, the latest version DC. Thank you very much, and we will stop for now.
Okay, so I hope you got that. And if there's any questions, please type them in the question and answer section, and we will answer them in the discussion section, which is coming up right now.
Right. So, Professor, so thank you very much for that insightful presentation on how signatures can be used practically. So now let's move on to our question and answer session. So let me begin with a question. Maybe we'll direct this question to Jayanta. The question is that what is the difference between an electronic signature and the digital signature, and which one is legally valid in Sri Lanka?
Yeah, so basically, I think this question was there even in the last webinar. I will allow the technical people in the team here to answer this question. Just give me a minute. Sorry. I was getting a bit parched up. So the main point to remember is that the law recognizes the concept of electronic signatures from a very wider perspective. So it talks of, so for example, I need to emphasize that the definition of electronic signature was enhanced or expanded or rather improved somewhere through the amending act in 2017 to include data in the form of in electronic form, so which means even a script or a software tool that is affixed to or logically associated with a data message, electronic document, record, or a communication to identify the signatory in relation to that message, electronic document, electronic record, etc. And the more important thing is that this tool called electronic signature can also use to identify the intention of the signatory in relation to the contents of a document such as a data message, electronic document, or electronic record. So the term that we have used, Aruna, in our law, the concept known as electronic signature is a very wide connotation. I will put it that way. Digital signature, digital certificates, perhaps as explained by Channa, as explained by Gihan, are technologies available using various kinds of devices and technologies and solutions. And I will put it that way. And also to conclude the discussion on this particular question by saying that in law, digital signatures, digital certificate is a subset or a component of the broader definition of electronic signatures. That is how I would explain it legally. But remember, the concept of digital signature is the terminology that many people understand. So while we have a broader definition in the law with the title electronic signature, the digital signature, digital certificate will definitely come within that broad definition. And as explained by Ihan as well as Channa, the technology solutions available will fit in to this wider framework. Why? Because it associates, these tools associate a person with the contents of an electronic document or electronic record or whatever, and sometimes can be used to signify intention of the signatory as well. Right? Thank you.
So, Jayanta,
can I just
let me ask this question, Jayanta. So, what you're trying to say
Aruna,
is,
can I just briefly explain a little bit on that?
Sorry, Channa?
Aruna, can Channa clarify something? Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
so
right. So maybe yes,
when you
Channa,
take-
you ask demonstrate something. Yes.
When you tell about the electronic versus digital, I would take, if you take a payment instrument, if you take a check, which actually the check clearing happens on scan images of check. So check would image of a check would have a physical signature, which is a scanned image, versus a fund transfer that is activated through what we call slips, Sri Lanka interbank payment system. A bulk payment mechanism where the payment payment instructions are going as a digital file, right? So in both cases, for example, somebody can sign on a iPad or tab, using a stylus. So that can actually conceived as electronic signature, where you electronically sign it. But but then obviously that can be altered. That can be changed in the middle. But if you come to a digital signature, as I think Dihan very clearly demonstrated, once you put that signature, if somebody makes a change, first of all, you can't make a change, but also once you make, if somebody makes, the validity of the signature goes away. So I think in that sense, from a legal validity, I mean, you can admit, for example, in fraudulent cases against checks, courts are requesting some of the digital representation of checks from us to take forward as evidence in some of the cases, so which they are using as electronic documents. But if somebody is challenging that this is not my signature, and if somebody else wants to prove no, that it is your signature, then the validity will actually come from a digital signature, which is also validated by third party, and also basically it provides non-repudiation. That means if you have put a digital signature, you cannot deny that you have not signed it, because electronically it can be proven that you are the one who has signed it. So I think that is sort of a difference from our technical difference, but both will count as a signature. But I think from a validity of a signature in terms of proving beyond doubt that you are the one who has digital signature will have better validity.
Okay, right. So basically it's both accepted, but yes, there are pros and cons when it's come to, so we need to identify which one is the better and ensure that we use the right method. In relation to the same question, perhaps you can answer this. There's a question, is a valid e-contract form if a party manually signs the document and scan and email the document to the other party, who will print the scanned document and manually sign? So there is someone who is signing in a e-contract digitally and then emailing to another party who takes a printout and signing it manually. How would this is accepted? Is this legally valid?
Yeah, so well, simple answer, Aruna, is that that's a very very good illustration of a practical use of the law. The law provides for that kind of regime to be used, although that's a very, very cumbersome, I would say a very, very basic kind of a primitive technique to adopt. In the era where digital signing with a watermark or some other digital footprint can be added to the document to ensure non-tampering, but nevertheless, there's a possibility that can be done. And basically, I would say if two parties are known to each other very well and trust each other, there is no harm in doing that kind of very basic primitive step of sending a signed document in scan form for me to print out and sign and send it back. But remember, if you don't know each other, if the two parties are not known to each other and don't trust each other, if you follow that kind of primitive step, if the other party, especially in a situation like in the present pandemic where we are not able to travel, we are not able to take action against people, especially even somebody living out of Colombo or living outside Sri Lanka, then we may have a predicament where you send a signed version in scan form to the other side, they take it out, and what if they put another page, if they amended the page, because the soft copies have been exchanged between the parties before signing, that other party changes certain clauses and puts in maybe 2-3 different pages in the contract, signs and sends it back. Then what do? That kind of tampering, there is no guarantee of integrity being ensured. In that kind of situation, my suggestion would be that it is safer to use the digitally signing methods explained by our two technology experts. Remember, although in law, both would have validity when it comes to ensuring non-repudiation authenticity and integrity to transaction. As Channa explained, the technology-based solutions, including relatively basic tools like what Vihan explained, is better than doing what you explained, Aruna.
Right. So in other words, Chant, integrity play a key role in this, the whole scenario. But in relation to that, when it's come to the contract, there's a very important questions which I thought is very useful for some discussion, because when it's come to the contract, the date is playing a critical role in this. So the question is, given the process of obtaining a signature via a platform, how do we address the difference in the execution of the date of a contract? Understand a signatory can avoid setting out the date. However, the certification set out the trail may indicate the different execution dates. So how do we address this?
Yeah, so basically for that, Aruna, you have to go back to the basics of contracts, basics of contract relationship, basics of offer acceptance, and the theories associated with contract and the contract formation principles, where Sri Lankan Roman Dutch law concepts are very helpful. I don't want to go into a legal debate of the nuances, but let me be very clear. In any contract, including in a sales contract, services contract, right? I mean, you go to a shop and get something off the shelf, that is, you are entering into some kind of contract, but then those are, I mean, we don't debate about the contract terms. Either we like the good and we buy it, or we don't buy it and we keep the good and come. So then you have more terms and conditions oriented contracts, service contracts, right? Those contracts are you have written terms and conditions spelled out. In all of these contracts, what is relevant is that there are two parties or multiple parties, and the parties have to reach agreement. So there's a principle of, there's a fundamental principle governing freedom of contract, allowing parties to determine the terms and conditions of a contract. So based on that fundamental principle, Aruna, the fallback I would propose in a situation of a doubt of the date of operation, date of effectiveness, is that the parties agree clearly in that kind of situation that you gave, Aruna, the date on which the contract will become effective for implementation. And that can be included in the preamble, it can be included at the top before the parties are named, right at the top, or at the very end, right? That is possible. So effective date is something that parties to a contract can agree upon and include in the body of the contract. Aruna?
Yes. Okay. Just trying to direct a question. Does Adobe sign e-signatures or document sign e-signatures valid in Sri Lanka as it is validating from the software itself? I think this is something that the professor demonstrated. Since there's a question, you want to give a direct answer?
Okay, let me try to answer. So any electronic or digital or whatever signature has some software associated with it, right? So unlike a paper signature where you have a piece of paper and a pen. So first of all, the software should accurately sign it. Now, if there is any question about that, we can get into a completely separate debate about that. And whether we are signing using a application such as Microsoft Word or Adobe Acrobat or any other software which is running on your machine, or whether they are using a cloud-based platform like DocuSign, Docs, whatever it is, you have to see whether that platform or the software can be trusted to properly sign the document. Now, assuming, right, just assuming that the software works properly, then any kind of signature would be valid. But of course, it depends on how well the entire trust is managed across the entire platform. So for example, how was a key generated? How was it installed on a particular thing? Is there a password? Did you have to touch your fingerprint to get to that key, right? Or could somebody else have stolen your phone and be using your phone to sign documents, right? Or your computer or anything else. So all of these problems will be there, but if everything is working, any of these platforms will actually be valid. But on the other hand, certainly there are so many ways in which fraud can occur. I mean, fraud occurs every day in normal paper-based documents, and fraud will occur every day, even in electronic signatures and documents. So we need to guard against all of that.
Can I just explain Aruna a bit, right?
Yeah, sure.
Now, for example, I mean, on a physical signature, there are so many frauds. I mean, check, people can change the signature, they have resubmitted checks. So there's a lot of fraud that is happening in physical signature. But in electronic signature, there are a lot of preventive mechanisms to ensure, but there's also a trusted third party who sort of guarantees that the signature belongs. So true, there could be certain issues using technology, but I think even we have a big problems even with physical signatures, which can be forged. Somebody else can sign it like me, or there are so many problems with that. But from electronic signature, the software itself, if configured properly, and if there is a third party who guarantees that the certificate belongs to the actual signer, then I would think there is security in such a signature, because there is always fallback and validation of saying, hey, this actual signature belongs to somebody. So I think that there's enough and more technology to ensure that the validity of a signature. So I mean, we are having the same problem in physical signatures anyway.
Right. Okay. So, Chanda, thank you very much. But I think there's another question in relation to that. When it's come to the digital signatures, does any Sri Lankan provider provides a cloud-based registered digital ID to sign documents without a physical evidence?
Right. So we have Enadocs, which is a Sri Lankan provider, which is a cloud-based provider. So if you go to our website, wfh.lk/solutions, there's a whole lot of things there. But if you look, that particular thing is also available there. So that's a local provider. Of course, he has some place in other countries as well, but the software is developed here locally. And it's a cloud-based system. Of course, there are others which are not based in Sri Lanka as well.
Chanda, this question is for you. How long does the Lanka Clear need to issue a digital certificate? I know you explained, but for better clarity, if you can.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the requirement of the documents somebody has to submit, and also sign an agreement and sign a form and sign application. So I mean, if those can be provided in a short time, within few days we can actually validate documents, get the agreement signed, and get the applications processed and create the signature. So it doesn't, the time really depends on the time the sender, the user and the organization takes to fulfill the requirements. Once that is done, we can immediately create the digital signature, and also we can send it a courier channel to the user. So I would say within few days, provided the actual user or the organization can once they fulfill the requirements, because the real validity is because we need to clearly identify that the sending signer of the document belongs to that organization, also the actual user. So for those, we have to validate some physical evidence, the NIC of the and so on. So once those are validated and application is submitted, it's a matter of maybe a day or two to actually get it into the system and send the the key. So the actual time is where the document validation.
Okay. Chana, what about the e-signatures on the checks and then the accepting it?
Yeah, so actually,
yes.
So two things. Right now, no, not in Sri Lanka. Right now, no, because actually one of the fundamental problems of e-signatures on certificate is there is a. I think that this we have to change it at some point. There is a regulation somewhere which says that the physical instrument has to be archived. In you take a check, right? So for some what happens is when a customer goes and hands over a check to a branch, the physical actually check gets archived to be reproduced. But in a electronic, when you say take a picture of the check or if you digitally sign a check, no instrument which to be archived because the physical instrument is actually with the customer or the end user, right? So because of that, apply digital signatures to checks. But I think it's about time we change this archive requirement where the archive, because obviously when we scan the images, we archive them digitally. So I think somehow we need to change the archive rule or the law or the act, the part where it says you have to physically archive the instrument. If you remove that, I think validity of electronics would be better.
Hello.
Yeah.
Chana, okay. Right. Before I move on to the next question, I just want to remind you that our next event is on the 23rd on the use of data analytics. And why I say this is because on the chat, Trisel will put it so that if you are interested, you could register. So Chana, going back to, there's another question perhaps very much relevant to you. Does digital signatures, what is signed here digital in Sri Lanka, would it accept in other countries?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. So the whole purpose of a digital signature to be accepted for cross-border transaction, whether it's document sharing, is the validity of the signature. So that is the whole start of the digital certificate, and that also can contribute to there has to be a root key that is acceptable internationally. So that is where the NCA task force was established to establish a root key for Sri Lanka, and this root key is established by NCA under I think the administrative part is done by Sri Lanka Sir. And once that root key is established, it is trusted by outside parties. So what happens is all the other CSPs would be pointing towards national root, and the trust structure of that root key travels down to the CSP digital signature or the certificate, and the trust structure is established. So right now what happens is at the moment, since there was no NCA all this time, as I explained in my presentation, it's a self-signing root key we have, which is administered and monitored by Central Bank, CA and SLCERT to ensure that we follow the practices. But we are in the process, because actually the NCA was established with what's called Web Trust certification, which is an international audit that was carried out, and that is completed in February. And we are in the process of actually getting Web Trust certification. Even though we have followed the Web Trust process, we are in the process of getting Web Trust certification. We will be aligning under the NCA route. So once that is done through the NCA route, our digital certificates will be accepted. So as of now, the acceptance is within Sri Lanka, but once we align with the NCA, the acceptance will be established with, cross-border acceptance will be established. And do you have anything else to add?
Yes, please add. Yes.
Aruna, just to add a small thing there. In one of my slides, I mentioned the root CA or national CA governance process. So we have national CA task force which is in place, which is jointly chaired by Central Bank and ICTA. It was there for some time, but there was a lot of technical hiccups getting the root CA in place, and after the exhaustive process of procuring the hardware, the software, and doing the international audit process, I am happy to say that the root certificate for Sri Lanka was generated on the 14th of February this year. That is the only little thing which I have not said in my slide. I just want to clarify one of the slides that gives details of the overall governing framework. Basically, the National CA mechanism and the National Certificate Authority governance is managed through an independent task force which is currently in place, and we have just completed this major milestone of getting the root certificate generated for Sri Lanka, and then the next step is for Lanka Sign CSP to sign on to the root CA, which means at that point there will be some degree of international compatibility between the digital certificates signed using Lanka Sign and the recognition with a counterpart signature in another country. Thank you.
Yes, I think Jayanta, I believe that is that part is very important, because just as much as you have digital signatures within Sri Lanka, you will have the digital signature documents coming from overseas as well. So when it's come to that point, still we are not in a position to accept, I believe, those. Is that right? From the overseas?
Well, I don't think so. Maybe, of course, I can ask Chan and Gihan to also technically verify that. Maybe internationally recognized certificates which are generated. There are so many internationally known trusted parties generating digital certificates. So when you attach such digital certificates and send it, especially in a B2B environment, and you can see that happening in the logistics sector, in the shipping sector, almost daily. When those documents are transacted, and when you check the signature, those signatures are derived from internationally accepted norms. So as long as it comes from an internationally accepted norm, in the Sri Lankan context, our law will recognize that for enforcement purposes, right? So it's from a technical perspective that I mentioned about that root key and the process associated with that, but that does not exclude legal recognition for all these various categories of electronic signatures. Thank you.
So in other words, Aruna, if right now, I mean, our process will take a few months to get the trust certification and get it under the root CA. But as of now, the option is they can go to an international CSP and get a certificate which is valid internationally. That is the option right now. But hopefully within few months, we will have the process available in Sri Lanka.
Right. Okay, Jayanta, there's another question. The checks issue being done by the banks on behalf of organizations such as dividends payments to shareholders, are they digital or electronic signatures?
Unfortunately, right now, digital signatures are not being used by them, right? But in our case, we electronically, I mean, for example, even some of the curfew passes that we obtained via central bank have been digitally signed. So we will be practicing with banks and the organization, but they have still not gone to the practice of digitally signing some of these things, even though the mechanism has been there. So I think there is a clear lack of awareness and education part that has to happen. So that the technology and everything is not there. It's just that they have not been really using that. I think the whole idea of this session is also so that people don't have a way of physically signing, and this channel is available, and also in a court of law is a way forward for people to actually use. So simply, as I said, we even sign our board papers and those are valid. So somebody like a bank doing that, absolutely it can be done. But right now, I have not really seen that practice being established.
Right. Professor, can you see the questions? For some reason, my chat box,
Yes, I can see the questions. So last one is by Vasantha. And there was a whole lot before that. If you want, I can read out some of the ones which have not been answered. This is not the chat box. This is in the Q&A. There's two separate things, so sometimes you get confused. This one is right. There's a right. So there is another question addressed. So since Aruna apparently may not be seen this, I'll just read out some of the questions. There is one to Mr. Fernando. In the event there is a scan of a specimen signature of an authorized signatory, can we cut paste his/her signatures on documents where the signature is required without obtaining a digital certificate? If there is no digital certificate, would it invalidate the agreement? Janta, so would you like to mention about cutting pasting a signature on a document?
So I think I mentioned this in a previous question, Ihan, when Aruna asked about sharing of an agreement where the agreement is signed and scanned and sent to the other side, and the other side prints it out and then signs and scans it and sends it back, kind of situation. So it is my answer would be similar to that even in this case, but in many practical situations nowadays, it is almost a regular occurrence where people have the tendency, especially very busy CEOs, chairman, they give their the scanned image of their signature to somebody whom they trust, and that person affixes that in the final document and then print it on a letterhead and then scans it and sends. So this has been a practice which has been there for a long period of time, and there are plenty of case law, especially in Hong Kong, Australia, Singapore, and even in UK, where those practices have been accepted. But if you look at the legality of it, often courts have looked at the control process, Gihan and Aruna, that has been adopted. So, for example, if the secretary maintains my scanned signature, every time it is affixed, it is entered into a logbook after verifying with me the final draft of the letter, and I have given email confirmation to the contents of a document to which that scanned image is embedded, and then you maintain a chart in relation to every document where my scanned signature was affixed. That kind of process with some degree of integrity would ensure legal recognition for these kinds of very old practices that have been in place for some time. That's how I would answer. But if somebody were to contest, then of course the internal control process and things like that will become relevant. And then of course, if it is asked from me, if I had seen this document and whether I have authorized and whether my signature is actually the one which is there, I would definitely confirm. The problem would arise if I say no, I did not sign this document. So if that in that kind of a situation, I would say, where the parties once again don't trust each other, it is always better to have a digital signing technology used to ensure non-repudiation and a higher degree of integrity.
Right.
I just want to put another comment on this. So even if you use a digital signature, now certainly a busy CEO could ask the secretary to place a digital signature on his behalf, and that could be normal practice and so on and so forth. So we need to really realize that digital signature does not necessarily mean that that person himself did it. In fact, it could also mean it was done by a secretary or a trusted assistant or somebody like that.
Right. Okay. Oh, so thank you very much. I think for the interest of the time.
Actually, one more question in the state.
Just
one more question. I think one question is in case of banking transactions, is it possible to send a transaction instruction with digital signatures to bank in Sri Lanka? I would say absolutely. We are already doing that. Just that if the banks, whether the banks are accepting is a question. But if somebody is interested in doing that, they can get in touch with us. We can talk to the relevant bank because we are actually practicing with a state bank. And if state bank can accept, I don't see why a private bank cannot accept this. So, so even central bank is digitally signing, some of them are submitting. This is absolutely possible. It's just that we need to get the practice going.
Right. Sure. I think thank you very much. I think with the interest of time, we have to conclude this. But I'm sure if there are questions, ladies and gentlemen, please pass those questions to us so that we can clarify with our expert panel. So with that, let me conclude. And first of all, I would like to thank our expert panel today, Mr. Jayantha Fernando and Mr. Chanda De Silva and Professor Gihan Dias for facilitating today's webinar and covering this important session. We believe that you have sessions have added value for you to work from home. Also, I would like to thank the Lanka LK Domain Registry and the Lanka Clear associating with this event, and of course our event partner SoftLogic Dell, and also our platform partner /Tech Labs, messaging partner TechSphere, and the event is supported by National Chamber of Commerce, Colombo Chamber of Commerce, Federation of Chamber of Commerce, together with ACCA, and also our corporate partners, Lanka Bell, LK Domain, Luna Labs, Orange IT, and Sarva, and also the Syrian. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, we will conclude our session, our next session on use of advanced analytics for economic recovery from COVID-19 economic hit. This is done by Amit Parija and Asit Parija from India. And our target group would be the CIOs, CTOs, and the CMOs. And also we would like to specify some of the industries the event will be useful. And so join with us for the next event on the 23rd. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much and have a